Look, mister, if we're gonna fight these zombies, we need guns! Stay back!
Developed by Blue Castle Games and released by Capcom in 2006. Today, we're going to investigate the undead outbreak at the Willamette shopping mall.
Oh, God damn it, I warned you!
In this episode, we're revisiting a thoughtfully crafted and genuinely challenging zombie sandbox experience. Frustratingly, Dead Rising's challenge is often the result of poor design decisions and not finely tuned difficulty. If you can live with its weird and often problematic quirks, you'll find an unabashedly fun game. When I bought Dead Rising for my Xbox 360, I remember being struck by the cover art. The image of a guy heaving a television above a crowd of zombies was compelling. It looks desperate, intense, and a bit silly. Good ingredients for anything in the undead genre. Playing the game in 2006, I recall having a fun time, but being disappointed that I kept getting stuck in a position where I couldn't follow the story, because I'd saved in a bad spot, didn't reach an objective in time, or was swallowed by the horde. A few years later, I would return to the game and master it, with the help of a forum and some game wikis. One thing that was true in 2006, and is true now, is that Dead Rising is a great backseat game. My brother and I used to take turns starting new games and seeing how long we could survive, or how much of the story we could make it through. It was fun to explore them all together and to laugh and experiment at adapting everyday items into weapons. Dead Rising is a great backseat game, more than any other game I can think of. Presentation and its gameplay captures the spirit of a low-budget B-movie. It's fun and schlocky gameplay and story, presented earnestly and directed with care. We'll talk about the story and the presentation first up, and then we'll get into gameplay. When you commence the story, you'll meet our protagonist, Frank West, an enterprising photojournalist who hired a helicopter to drop him off into the recently quarantined town of Willamette, Colorado. You land at the local mall and meet Carlito, who gives you a cryptic warning about what is to come.
It's too quiet.
Almost as if everyone's already dead.
From there, you go down into the depths of the mall, meet other survivors, and begin to unravel the mystery of the outbreak in the 72 hours you have before your chartered helicopter returns to pick you up. In the first few cutscenes, you'll notice a few things. Dialogue is cheesy and cliched, but the voice actors deliver it with energy. Performances are motion captured, so animations are smooth, lifelike, and full of character. Camera work is cinematic. There's different lens lengths, interesting framing, depth of field, use of filters, and perspective shifts. It makes for entertaining viewing, and the excellent execution of the cutscenes elevates the plot, which is essentially a low-rate conspiracy thriller with zombies. On this revisit, I am thoroughly impressed with these cutscenes. Despite low-poly models, iffy lip syncing, and older textures, they hold up because of their performance, animation, and direction. I think that's a facet of Dead Rising's presentation that doesn't get enough credit. Other aspects of the presentation also show that there was a fair bit of thought put into them. The user interface is a world news themed affair, where objectives are referred to as scoops, and the instructions for your objectives scroll across the bottom of the page, like a news ticker. The plot itself is interesting enough to keep you going, and there are some decent twists that impact gameplay later on in the story. Music is a fun mix of harmless mall tunes and some more orchestrated pieces for dramatic moments. Throughout and outside of the main story, which is cleverly structured into different cases, you will encounter psychopaths, human outbreak survivors who have gone crazy and serve as bosses. Even before revisiting Dead Rising, I reckon I could identify the majority of them, having not even played the game for more than 10 years. The psychopaths are incredibly distinctive and colourful characters.
Oh yeah, I know why.
And they are introduced and dispatched with flair and creativity. Some are sympathetic, some are outright bonkers, and all are over the top. They are a charming part of the Dead Rising experience, and their exaggerated egos are a delight to see.
Zombies came! Everyone died!
For an overall comment on the story and the plot, it's fun and engaging for the majority, but it falls on its face at the finish line. That's not a reason to avoid the game. Just know that the ending might leave you a bit dissatisfied. More specifically, I'm talking about the true ending, because that's another part of Dead Rising's plot, is multiple endings depending on how you play the game. You can play Dead Rising to complete the main story, save all the survivors, defeat all the psychopaths, kill all the zombies, or just to muck around. And it's nice that there is an acknowledgement in the story for each of those paths that you can take.
You guys are looking for someone here, aren't you?
Now, let's talk about gameplay.
Who is that? Where did you take it?
You help me, I help you.
One of Dead Rising's most underrated gameplay achievements is having an effective photography system in a game about a photojournalist. The game begins with your flight over the town of Willamette and taking photos of the carnage below. There's simple zoom controls. When you're in the mall, there's batteries for the camera that need to be replaced every now and then, and there's a photo viewer in the menu where you can save your favourite images. Taking photos isn't arbitrary. There are special stickers on landmarks and items of interest that encourage you to document your journey around the mall for extra experience. Outside of static subjects, everything in your frame is assessed and given a point value or a theme, snapping everything from silly outtakes to massive hordes and human moments between survivors rewards you with experience points towards leveling up and new abilities. While I'm not a fan of the perverted erotica category, having a detailed photography system demonstrates a commitment to form and function that many games completely miss. Frank West is a journalist in story and in gameplay. It's not a background fact or a useless note on his biography or some added bit of character flavour. It's an actual mechanic that you engage with as a player, and so it strengthens Frank's identity and place in the world and the story.
A hot-headed, underhanded, hotshot paparazzi with nothing better to do than to invade people's privacy.
I try.
Another bloody and brilliant gameplay system is Dead Rising's combat. Unlike Zack Snyder's 2004 film Dawn of the Dead, Dead Rising takes full advantage of its shopping mall setting. You are a journalist, not a mercenary, so you must adapt everyday items into zombie defense tools. There is a heap of joy to be had exploring the varied and well-realised stores around the Parkview Mall and seeing what you can pluck off the shelf and arm yourself with. From park benches to post-hole diggers, gemstones to golf clubs, mannequins to mailboxes, there's no shortage of variety. What makes the massive selection of stuff fun to play with is almost all of the items have their own characteristics, effects on zombies, or a unique special move. There is a degradation effect, which means all of your weapons will break or run out of ammo eventually. So you cannot just fill your inventory with swords when you find the antique shop. You will often be forced to adapt to using whatever you can find to get through the undead swarms. The swarms themselves are great to look at. One chompy zombie on their own is rarely a threat, even if you're unarmed. But when you're staring at a crowd 300 deep and your objective is on the other side, that's a different equation. A lot of credit should go to Blue Castle Games, who would go on to become Capcom Vancouver, for manipulating the Xbox 360 tech to display so many zombies on screen.
Fantastic!
The shambling waves of the undead are a cornerstone of the game's atmosphere, and if you'll excuse the contradiction, they add life to the game world. They'll also add to your woes, as you might have to drag an uncooperative survivor through a swarm of the undead. Nothing has changed in the artificial intelligence department from when this game released in 2006. Human survivors are thick-headed dopes who will routinely get stuck on walls, in objects, and zombies. You get massive XP bonuses for bringing them safely back to base, so it's worth rescuing a few, if you can, throughout your journey. Just don't be surprised if you lose a few along the way. Survivor AI is one of the few areas of jank, or problematic and outdated gameplay design. Other issues include a wonky GPS guide arrow, too many attacks that stun-lock you, constant calls on the radio, slow-moving text narratives for some situations, and a terrible default aiming scheme. Guns in general are rare and powerful, but they're difficult to use effectively, partly because you can't move while you're shooting, and when you aim by default, it snaps to the player orientation, not the camera orientation. I recommend fixing that in the game settings at the start of your playthrough. Another unfortunate gameplay warning for newcomers is, like its story, Dead Rising's gameplay falls apart in the final 2 hours or so. That's not much in terms of your overall time with the game, but just as the story crescendos, it sends you on a big fetch quest before the next plot point, and then the final boss fight itself is both difficult and unsatisfying. Fair warning.
God, it's you. Look, don't sneak up on me.
Brad was attacked. I located him on the monitor. Ugh!
It's probably just a sprain.
I've gotta help Brad, or he's done for.
All right, fine. Give me your gun. Come on. I'm the reason you just got hurt. Let me help.
No, I can't let a civilian do that. That's against regulations.
Yeah, well, I don't think they had zombie-infested malls in mind when they wrote those regulations, kid.
You know how to use this?
Kinda. I've covered wars, you know.
The final major gameplay feature we should talk about is divisive, difficult to master, and was eventually dropped from the Dead Rising franchise. Namely, its time limit. Main story scoops, human survivors, deranged psychopaths, and certain in-world events will pop up throughout your 72 hours in the mall, but none of them will last forever. Dead Rising's sandbox spirit extends to engagement with both its main and side missions. You do not have to save everyone, investigate anything, or even leave the safety of the security office. If you want to bunker down for 72 in-game hours until your chartered helicopter returns, go for it. Like we talked about earlier, Dead Rising has a number of endings based on your ability or inability to meet the time constraints of the main quest. On the other side of the coin, when you have your first playthrough, you will not complete all the objectives. You will lose scoops, survivors, and miss encounter opportunities. That's a tough feeling for a game, to be missing out on content due to poor ability, planning, or just lack of knowledge. I can understand why constricting time pressure on players would be an issue for some. For me, I think it's an intrinsic part of the Dead Rising play experience. The game, in its originally released form, gave you one save slot. That meant no save scumming. If you made a bad decision, lacked resources, or stuff up your timing, you're done. Often seen as a negative, this mechanic simply encouraged multiple playthroughs and naturally adjusted the difficulty. Every time you restart, you come back with experience and attributes earned through leveling, such as increased carry capacity or movement speed. More importantly, you come back with more knowledge. You know how the zombies work, where the good shops are, that the lights in the mall go off at 11 PM, that zombies are more deadly at night, where the cases and survivors will pop up, who the psychopaths are. Frank gets stronger, and you get smarter. Part of the issue with this type of replay-focused game design is that comfortable runs of the main plot in Dead Rising do have to be optimised. You have to know where the best weapons are, how to find books that extend their lifespan, where the shortcuts are around the mall, and how to unlock them. None of this information is handed to you in the game. I found these tricks out from word of mouth and later game forums. It is theoretically possible, beginning at level 1, to complete all cases, rescue all survivors, and also complete the zombie genocide achievement. I understand the strict timing combined with the jank and difficult systems, with no encouragement or tactical support beyond basic tutorials, would drive players away or have them just drop the game. I'll admit that when I first played through, I never finished Dead Rising's main story. I never got the true ending because it was hard. It was too much of a grind, and going back to the start, even with new knowledge and powers, was only fun for the first handful of times. Lucky for you, those frustrations can be avoided. You can now go into Dead Rising forewarned and so forearmed. The PS4 re-release saves a lot of the grief too mechanically, because there are multiple save slots. This allows you flexibility and room to experiment, and eliminates the new game to new game grind. Loading time is also thoroughly reduced, which eases transitions between zones in the mall, and more importantly, the secrets of Dead Rising are out there. If you are so inclined, Google a beginner's guide, learn where some important items are, and reduce your need to restart in order to get through to the ending that you want. To conclude, I think people misunderstood that Dead Rising was not a game designed to be beat on its first blind run-through, and I have a stack of admiration for a game that is fun to play at its core, but it wants you to work to see it through. Even if you're not interested in seeing out the well-directed and pulpy story, then there's still fun to be had skateboarding through the mall, stabbing zombies with coat hangers, or seeing how hard you can throw a cash register. In my reviews, I don't give scores or tell everyone to buy or replay a game. Here are my qualified recommendations for Dead Rising. If you love zombies, zombie fiction, movies, comics, or zombie media generally, Dead Rising is a genre classic and I recommend it. Even with some gameplay hurdles to overcome, it is a special experience for fans of gore and the shambling occult. If you love survival horror, with an emphasis on survival, I also recommend it. The setting is unlike anything else, and the challenge is firm but fair once you master its systems. If you love true sandbox, open world adventure games with an original premise, then I recommend Dead Rising with caution. Play this game with a beginner's guide. Absolutely do not go in blind. For most other gamers, I can't recommend it wholeheartedly. If you love first-person shooters, the combat in Dead Rising will probably piss you off. If you love big-budget AAA modern third-person adventure games, you'll find Dead Rising choppy and awkward to play at times. The best advice I can give, if you haven't played any Dead Rising game, is to play the first one until it isn't fun to play anymore. That might come quickly, or you might get hooked and be invested for a long time. It's an utterly unique game, even among its sequels. For me, it was a pleasure to revisit the mall at Willamette and get reacquainted with the locals. Thanks for listening, and take care.